Welcome everyone to the Cluster API Implementers meeting on Wednesday, the 24th of October, 2018, for the European time zone. We'll go ahead and get started with any items that happen to be on the agenda, which I'm just pulling up now. It looks like we have no items on the agenda. So, does anyone have any business they want to bring to the meeting today?
I have a question regarding the status sub-resource and I guess RBAC problems. If anybody has seen that with, specifically I have seen that with the GCP provider after the switch to KubeBuilder.
So yes, I did see that. I did see that once we did the initial migration on the OpenStack provider. We worked around that by going straight to 112.1, and that seemed to resolve any issues that we had. So we had some issues when we were trying to run 110 and 1.9. As soon as we switched to 112.1, everything just seemed to work. So.
Yeah, I see. I expected that. I just couldn't do that couldn't do that easily because the scripts and stuff will then fail because you need to do a couple of changes. But yeah, well, I guess we will see if we can make 112 happen.
Yeah, so, we had to make some pretty significant changes in how we were deploying some things, especially in some of the scripts to do with kubeadm and the resources we were passing to kubeadm with the V1 Alpha 3 resource set. But it actually ended up making it much easier to do some manipulations on kubeadm to get some stuff deployed, which was quite nice. And as well, it was relatively painless, I would say. We were even experiencing the API server starting to throw 500s with some of the RBAC stuff that was happening when we were trying it with 110. And as soon as we went to 112, it cleared itself up.
Cool. Sorry, what was the provider again? OpenStack, you said?
Yeah, with the OpenStack provider.
Cool, thanks.
The AWS one is also, we did the same thing. We went to 112.1, fixed up the RBAC rules, and everything just works now.
Cool, thanks.
But I wanted to discuss like a more kind of model concept question, if people are interested. Unless people have other more practical things to discuss.
I think the agenda is open, so feel free.
Yeah, so well, I mean, I started thinking a little bit about what defines a provider, right? So I'm a little bit confused because it seems at the moment there are all sorts of things that go into a provider. You know, it's like it is about managing cloud resources. Well, in some cases it isn't at all. It is also about bootstrapping nodes, and it seems like each provider would implement certain opinions about how cloud resources are managed, or how Node OS is treated, and various other things like that. So I was wondering whether other people are on the same page as me or not with respect to that, and you know, what are your thoughts in general on that topic? So, I mean, I initially was assuming that Cluster API provider would be mostly about managing resources, whether it's in the cloud or not, and sort of maintaining like machines that they're supposed to be where it's supposed to be running and such things. But then I think there's something else that it would call out to, potentially a different provider for actually bringing individual nodes up. because that is somewhat somewhat cloud independent, right? For well, if you look at it in a certain way, right? So I wonder what people think about that in general. Make it sort of, if it's not quite clear, just
I think you cut out there, Ilya. Your audio is kind of sketchy, so I think we're all having a little bit of a hard time understanding everything that you're saying. But
okay.
if I understood you correctly, basically you're just talking about what is actually in scope for a provider, what isn't in scope for a provider. Should we have maybe some different concepts of other actuators for different resources with providers, or maybe I misunderstood you there?
Yeah, that's roughly what I'm thinking. Yeah. It's a kind of a general open-ended philosophical discussion, because it seems like at the moment we've defined a provider and everybody's going to implement the roles into different providers, but it seems like each of those providers will have to find a way to support different OSs, to support different modes of using those OSs, etc. For example, let's consider just
Yeah, I think that ties in pretty well with the item that Marco brought last week about having some kind of externalized method of dealing with different OS configurations, whether you happen to be using something like Ubuntu or CentOS or CoreOS, Cloud Linux, whatever it's called now. Having some sort of synonymized way of dealing with those and giving us some kind of interface to drill into that without having to just repeat code, or in the case of what we have now, just kind of smash random shell scripts into place and hope they work. I definitely see significant room for improvement on that, and potentially without going into deploying packages and things like that, having some kind of externalized controller that says this is how this machine should be configured. So not just this is a machine, but doing something to generate the configuration of the machine, whether that be a cloud init, whether that be, in the case of the SSH controller, an SSH bash script that gets put onto the machine, cloud init for CoreOS, something along those lines, or ignition template for CoreOS. My apologies.
Yeah, and it would be nice to define some kind of contract there, the best format for contracts we have in the world of Kubernetes is the Kubernetes API, right? So yeah, so I think that's really good to hear that other people thinking the same thing. So I'm not just theorizing here on my own around useless things. It sounds like it would make sense to discuss this a little bit more. And so that's cool. I'm glad to hear there's some interest in this topic in general. So so I haven't got any more particular thoughts. I really kind of want to check in what people think about it in general. So it sounds good. That it sounds reassuring that I'm not on my own in thinking this. So we can carry on the discussion perhaps in our meeting.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think Marco, if you want to chime in here, you're the one who kind of threw in the design doc and started driving the effort in specifically to the machine script, making that a little bit more clear and consistent. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? I know we're going to talk about it later tonight as well, I guess. Marco. Apparently he has fallen asleep. All right. Yeah, so that aside, I think, Ilya, if I recall correctly, you brought it up the last cluster API meeting, something kind of in line with this as we were discussing a whole lot of other topics. But I definitely think it's something that we need to drive forward a little bit more. Are you intending to bring that up tonight?
Sure, I could certainly do that, and we could just continue the discussion. I mean, I don't have anything super solid at the moment. It's just sort of the question whether we should start discussing it and thinking about it. Yeah, and if people have to do that, I'd be happy to collaborate on some kind of spec.
Cool. Yeah, and for those of you who haven't seen it, Nadir just made a cross-ref and also put it into the chat. Oh, big hearts to you, bro. So yeah, that's good, and I definitely think we should take a look at that and comment on it a little bit. There was discussion about maybe putting it into Git this week. So yeah, for those of you who are interested, please read it, comment on it, and then we can go ahead and take a look at how to move that forward. We don't see.
Yeah, I think that's, we just add one more thing. I think it's quite important to kind of find the right way of talking about this, so that we don't say that, well, hold on, now we all pause and we have to talk about this new abstraction that we all absolutely must have. I think we could just we should try to find a way to have this discussion while everybody's still making progress on their implementation, and have this sort of an add-on we could start adopting in the future. We don't have to all jump in on this and pose all implementations because this would have to be implemented. I'm not trying to suggest anything like that, just to be clear.
Well, and I think the general concept of the providers was, or not even the general concept, it was explicitly decided that each provider would start implementing things on their own and we would bubble things up as we came to them. I think we're all coming to this one, and so it's time to put something in place for it. It's the maturity has gotten there, and we have to do something about it, because otherwise we're all just writing a whole bunch of bash, and I don't enjoy doing that. So.
Oh yeah, totally.
All right. Does anybody else have any items that they wanted to bring to the table?
I have a newbie question. So from what I understand, you need to separate clusters by namespaces. So you cannot have multiple clusters in one namespace. First off, is that correct? And secondly, can somebody point me to the design decision? Why is that? Why don't I just have basically, I don't know, an owner ref from the cluster to the machines or something like that?
I have no answer for you on that one. And it sounds like nobody else does either. I was actually, maybe it was you I was discussing this with the other day in Slack, but I know somebody brought it up in the Slack channel as well in the Cluster API and was asking very similar questions. And I haven't seen any design doc that that covers that, or why we chose to do that. It may just be an artifact of the history of Cluster API, and coming from kube deploy on down. I do know that there are some users of the original origins of what became Cluster API where they don't deploy the control plane onto machines, they deploy the whole control plane into a namespace. And as a result of that, they had a cluster per namespace concept already. And I think that may have just fallen out of that and be kind of a vestigial tale, but I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, thanks. That's just something that feels a bit weird to me because I would assume I don't know, I have my, let's say, management namespace. I put all my clusters and machines and whatnot in there. And yeah. So that's why I wanted to understand if there is, what's the design decision behind that. Thanks for your answer.
There's a lot of notes in the Cluster API project notes, particularly from June and previously. I think it's a lot of it is just no one's got around to doing anything about it. And especially the CRD migration was like took priority against everything else. So it might be time to start talking about it again.
All right, does anyone else have any business they wanted to bring forward? Going once, going twice. All right. Just as a news item for the Cluster API space ecosystem, whatever we want to call it. Are we actually a working group? I'm not sure what we are. I know we belong to SIG Cluster Lifecycle, and there is a working group page, but I'm not sure if we're actually a working group. So we should identify.
I always thought there was a working group, but
no, I think the nomenclature is working groups tend to be cross-SIG. So we are sub-project within SIG Cluster Lifecycle.
are you sure? I think well, working group can be cross-SIG, but doesn't have to be. The other property of working group is that it's somewhat temporary or time-limited effort, right? While a SIG is supposed to be around for a while, but they may go up and down. But working groups come and go, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, so working groups are supposed to be
And
temporary.
they may.
I think we're definitely a sub-project, whether that's also a working group, don't know.
All I know is the page.
I think sub-projects are. Sorry. I think sub-projects essentially mean repos, right?
Sure. Either way, I think whatever this page is that I just linked in the chat, this Cluster API working group page, needs some work. It either needs to go away or it needs some work. That being said, exciting news, as I was mentioning, in the Cluster API ecoverse, the DigitalOcean provider, Marco, has just made a request to move that into the Kubernetes SIGs namespace. So congratulations, thank you. Awesome stuff from the guys at Lutza. We really appreciate it. So yeah. Last chance here if anybody wants to ask any questions, throw anything on the agenda. Otherwise, we'll give you half an hour back of your day. All right. thank you very much for attending today, and we hope to see some of you at least a little bit later in the cluster API meeting, and enjoy the rest of your, well, we're European, so the rest of your afternoon. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.